Sophie, till late in the third quarter, you guys were struggling offensively in that frame. Second half in general didn't feel the same as the first half on that end. Did something change for you guys? What did you see as kind of leading to stalling on that end?
Yeah, I think we were just kind of slow. And every time that we're slow, especially defensively, it just somehow affects our offense.
Sophie Cunningham just dropped the most brutal truth bomb in WNBA history, and it's about to expose everything wrong with the Indiana Fever right now. While her coach was making excuses after blowing a winnable game, Sophie looked straight into the cameras and delivered a message that has fans questioning if Stephanie White even deserves her job anymore. What she said next will shock you, and the way she called out her own team's mentality proves why the Fever are spiraling without Caitlin Clark.
Above her head is Cunningham with a steal. Cunningham feeds Sims, who goes coast to coast and lays it in.
So they had to make sure they had the right shot clock time as well while they were reviewing that.
So Indiana with a 10-point lead here. 6 minutes until halftime as Boston finds some space and knocks it down. Now Sims launches ahead for Mitchell. What a pass by Odyssey Sims.
The Fever just suffered their most embarrassing loss of the season, falling 88-84 to the Washington Mystics, a team sitting dead last in the standings. This wasn't just any regular season game either, with playoff positioning on the line, and sitting in 7th place, Indiana had everything to play for. They built a commanding 13-point lead in the second quarter, looking like they were about to cruise past one of the league's worst teams. Then everything fell apart in the most spectacular way possible. Washington unleashed a devastating 22-7 run that completely flipped the script. In just minutes, the Fever went from controlling the game to fighting for their playoff lives. The building went silent as fans watched their team hand over momentum to rookies who shouldn't have been able to compete at this level. Sonia Citron looked completely unshaken as she poured in 21 points, while Kiki Jefferson muscled her way to 18 points and 12 rebounds, including crucial second-chance boards that swung momentum with every possession. These weren't supposed to be the names dominating veteran players fighting for postseason spots, but that's exactly what happened when Indiana lost their edge and allowed inexperienced players to dictate the tempo.
It's up to the chat. Get excited! It's in the chat. Why at the same time? Because I'm you and you're me. We switch parties. Zub's in the chat.
The numbers tell a story of complete self-destruction. Indiana committed 21 fouls, sending Washington to the free throw line 26 times. In the fourth quarter alone, the Mystics shot 14 free throws while the Fever handed them possession after possession. These weren't phantom calls or bad officiating, these were careless, preventable mistakes that gifted points to a team that was begging to be put away. Aaliyah Boston dropped 20 points and 9 rebounds. Kelsey Mitchell finished with 14 points and 9 assists. And Sophie Cunningham chipped in 8 points with 6 assists and 3 steals. Those are winning numbers against any team in the league, especially one fighting just to stay competitive. But here's where the controversy really explodes. Chloe Bibby, who's shooting 42% from 3-point range this season, played exactly 0 minutes. Let that sink in. While Indiana's offense was getting stuck and struggling to create spacing, their best perimeter shooter sat on the bench for the entire game. When reporters pressed Stephanie White about this decision, her explanation was laughably weak. She claimed it was about defensive matchups and rebounding concerns, but fans watched Indiana give up wide open threes and let Kiki Jefferson dominate the paint anyway. So what exactly were they protecting by keeping their most reliable shooter glued to the bench?
Yeah, I think we over dribbled at times. Our off-ball movement wasn't there. We did a lot of standing. It's almost like we gave the ball to Kelsey and just tried to watch her work. And that's not when we're at our best. I mean, yes, certainly we want to have the ball in our hands, but we've got to continue to get movement with and without the basketball. It was getting stuck. I mean, we want to play 0.5 to 1 second basketball, and we weren't. And it's got to get moving. And
with Chloe Bibby tonight, were there thoughts of maybe plugging her in to try and spark the offense a little bit, or what was the decision behind not playing her tonight?
Yeah, there were some thoughts. I think that it matched up defensively more than anything with the way that we were going to try to play them, or in some of our switches and things like that. So that was mostly the reason.
And then just with the rotation, was it just those eight or seven that you ran with? Was it just they were flowing well and you wanted to just leave that going, or what was the thought there?
Yeah, I think some of it was defense. Being able to execute the type of defensive coverages that we wanted to have against this, the way that they play.
This is where Sophie Cunningham's post-game fire becomes legendary. While White was spinning excuses about offensive flow and defensive coverages, Sophie cut through all the noise with brutal honesty that every Fever fan needed to hear. She didn't dance around the issues or blame injuries. She looked straight ahead and delivered a message that proves why players respect her leadership more than anything coming from the coaching staff right now. That wasn't just motivation speak. That was Sophie calling out the fact that opponents no longer fear the Indiana Fever. Teams are coming into their building expecting to win, and they're walking out with victories because Indiana has lost that killer mentality that once made them untouchable. The same Fever squad that used to intimidate opponents with their defensive pressure and transition attack has become predictable, allowing struggling teams like Washington to come in and execute their game plan without resistance. Sophie demanded accountability, aggression, and a return to the toughness that made this team dangerous earlier in the season, when every possession felt like a statement and opponents knew they were in for a fight. Meanwhile, her coach was explaining why the offense got stuck instead of taking responsibility for the decisions that left shooters on the bench.
And I think it was something like a 22-7 run, the end of the second, beginning of the third quarter. And those are hard to recover from when anytime really, but when you're missing pieces. And, we've got to make sure that we're sharper at times. We don't have the margin to have lulls within quarters. And then I believe they had something like 21 points from free throw line and turnovers of their 26 in the fourth. And, we control that defending without fouling. We control that taking care of the basketball, decision making at times. And some of it's, playing some people out of position, and some of it's just not being, valuing the basketball in the way that we need to value it, being a little sloppy with it.
The contrast couldn't be more obvious. Stephanie White admitted the offense was getting stuck, saying too many possessions turned into isolation plays for Kelsey Mitchell while everyone else watched. But instead of putting shooters on the floor to create spacing, she doubled down on rotations that clearly weren't working. Mitchell was forced to drive into packed paint over and over again while Bibby sat unused, and fans are rightfully asking why their coach couldn't see what everyone else in the building was witnessing. White's post-game press conference felt like watching someone describe a house fire while holding the matches. She identified every problem, the fouling, the stagnant offense, the defensive breakdowns, but took zero ownership of the strategic decisions that could have prevented the collapse. Sophie's message was about accountability and mental toughness, while White offered explanations that sounded more like excuses with each passing question. The Caitlin Clark factor looms over everything happening with this team right now. Her continued absence has forced Indiana into desperate roster moves, signing players like Odyssey Sims on hardship deals just to have enough guards to field a lineup. The timeline for Clark's return remains shrouded in mystery, with no official updates from the organization and fans growing more frustrated by the day. Every game without their superstar point guard puts exponentially more pressure on a roster that's already showing serious cracks under the weight of expectation. The Fever have faced more adversity than most teams this season, losing Sydney Colson and Ori McDonald to season-ending injuries in the same devastating week. But that's exactly why Sophie's message about mental toughness hits so hard and resonates with everyone watching this team struggle.
I think the thing that we just have to continue to do that kind of got us on the run we had before the last couple games was we were aggressive at the opponent attack on defense, and that led to easy transition buckets. That led to everyone being aggressive and on their front foot on the offensive end. And we have new players, and that's okay. But we just have to adjust, and we need them. But we've faced a lot of adversity, but we should be used to that by now. And I think they could just kind of outwork this a little bit, and that just can't be our excuse. We really control the outside things. You can't control injuries, and so that's why you really do have to control your mental and control what you can control. And I think that we have a really good group. We're still a tight-knit group. We're adding new players in that are amazing. O's been around the league for a long time, and I know you don't think so, but it's a blessing that you weren't on another team because we need you here. And so I just think it's an adjustment period. The highs and lows, you just have to stay kind of steady, right? Every team faces it. I feel like we faced it more than most this year, but I think this is is going to set us up for something good. I don't know if it's this season. I don't know if it's next season. But I think there's always something that you can be grateful for and learn during those hard times.
She acknowledged the injuries and roster changes, but refused to let them become excuses for losing winnable games. Other teams have faced adversity too, but champions find ways to overcome it instead of explaining it away after losses to bottom-dwelling opponents. This controversy runs deeper than one bad game, though. The gap between player accountability and coaching responsibility is becoming impossible to ignore. Fans are watching Sophie Cunningham demand excellence, while Stephanie White offers analysis instead of solutions. The players threw everything they had at Washington, fighting through fatigue and limited rotations to stay competitive, but the strategic adjustments never came when momentum started shifting. Boston anchored the defense and scored efficiently inside. Mitchell created opportunities for teammates while shouldering an impossible offensive load. Cunningham provided energy, steals, and leadership that kept Indiana fighting until the final buzzer. These aren't players who quit or lack effort. They're competitors being let down by decisions that handcuff their ability to close out games they should be winning. The playoff implications make this loss even more devastating. Sitting in 7th place with the regular season winding down, every game becomes crucial for postseason positioning. Dropping winnable contests to teams like Washington isn't just disappointing, it's potentially season-ending when margins for error are this thin. Sophie understands those stakes better than anyone, which is why her post-game message carried so much urgency.
So, what was the message inside the locker room? Like, what were you guys talking about there after the game?
Yeah, I just think that we've had some hard injuries this year. We've had some different lineups and roster spots. And, to be frank, I don't think anyone else around the league thinks that we can do it anymore. But I think that our group does. And I think that we just have to get that confidence back. When we're clicking offensively, defensively, we're scary. And not a lot of teams can beat us, even with the roster that we have right now. And so for us, it's just remembering who we are. It's our identity. We got to get back to being dogs, got to get back to being aggressive, being on our front foot, and not allowing teams like this to come in here and outwork us.
The past couple games where it feels like kind of that wear and tear's taking a toll?
Not really. And I think that she kind of hit it. You have to give yourself a little bit of grace. When you have so many different lineups, and I have never played together. Hasn't played with a lot of people, maybe Tosh. But you have to know her style. She has to know our style. And so it's different, but that's part of being a pro. You got to adjust and you got to learn fast. And I think that's a really cool thing too, because when you click, you click. And so that's scary for people coming in here and trying to play us.
She's demanding that this team rediscover their identity before it's too late. The Fever were scary when clicking on both ends earlier this season, but that version feels like a distant memory after watching them hand away leads to inferior opponents. Sophie's call to get back to being dogs isn't just motivation, it's a recognition that this group has lost the edge that made them dangerous. What happens next will define whether Indiana can salvage their playoff hopes, or if this controversy becomes the story that derails their entire season. The schedule doesn't get any easier from here, with multiple games against teams fighting for the same playoff spots that Indiana desperately needs to secure. Every possession matters now. Every defensive stop carries championship implications, and every coaching decision will be scrutinized by fans who are losing patience with moral victories and close losses to inferior opponents. The players have shown they're ready to carry the load and take accountability for their performance, grinding through injuries and roster instability while maintaining the competitive fire that defines championship contenders. The question now is whether the coaching staff will match that energy or continue offering explanations instead of solutions. Sophie Cunningham just drew a line in the sand, challenging everyone in that locker room to rediscover the mentality that wins games in this league. Her message was clear: no more excuses, no more moral victories, and no more watching inferior teams outwork them in their own building. The Fever have talent, they have heart, and they have players willing to demand excellence from everyone around them. But talent means nothing without the right strategic decisions, and heart doesn't matter if rotations handcuff your best weapons. Sophie delivered the leadership this team needed in that moment, while questions about coaching decisions continue to pile up with each passing game. The contrast between player accountability and strategic excuses is becoming the defining storyline of Indiana's season. Whether the Fever can turn this controversy into championship fuel or let it tear apart their playoff dreams depends on what happens next. Sophie Cunningham just showed why she's the leader this team needs right now. The question is whether everyone else will follow her lead or continue making the same mistakes that led to this disaster against Washington. What do you think? Is Sophie right that this team needs to get back to being dogs? players? Or should Stephanie White be held responsible for strategic decisions that keep costing winnable games? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know if you think the Fever can still make noise in the playoffs without Caitlin Clark, or if this controversy proves they need major changes before next season. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story is far from over, and the next few games will determine whether Sophie's message becomes the turning point or the beginning of the end for Indiana's playoff hopes.